I was 23 and struggling to make ends meet. My job barely paid me enough to cover rent and groceries, and my debts were piling up. I spent sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, wondering how I'd ever climb out of this hole. One night, while scrolling through Reddit, I stumbled upon a thread about the dark web. People shared rumors about job offers that paid generously for seemingly simple tasks. It sounded too good to be true, but when you're desperate, anything feels worth a shot. After some digging, I found a way in. It was confusing at first, a maze of links leading to shadowy forums and chat rooms. My heart pounded in my chest as I read through posts offering strange jobs like pick up a package or deliver a letter to a certain location. The risks were clear, but the money was tempting. Then, one post caught my eye. $2,000 for a night of surveillance. All I had to do was watch a house from my car and report any unusual activity. It seemed harmless, just sitting in a car and watching. I replied to the post, and within minutes, I received a response. They provided an address to a house in a quiet, run-down suburb and instructed me to arrive by 9 p.m. I hesitated, wondering what kind of people were behind this, but I rationalized that I needed the money. On the night of the job, I drove to the location, a place that looked like it hadn't seen a renovation in decades. The street was dimly lit, and the only sound was the hum of my car engine. I parked down the street, keeping my lights off, and texted my contact. "I'm here." A reply came back almost instantly. "Good. Turn off your phone. Observe quietly. No pictures, no questions." I followed their instructions, turning off my phone and sinking lower in my seat. Hours passed, and I began to feel like a fool, sitting in the dark for no reason. But just as I was about to give up, I saw movement at one of the windows. A light flickered on inside the house, casting a faint glow through the dirty curtains. A man appeared, pacing back and forth. He looked nervous, constantly glancing out the window, as if he was expecting someone. Around midnight, a sleek black sedan pulled up to the house. My heart skipped a beat. A woman stepped out, dressed in dark clothes, carrying a large duffel bag. She moved quickly to the door, and the man let her in without hesitation. For the next 15 minutes, the house was silent. Then, the front door opened, and the woman came out, but the duffel bag was gone. She glanced around before getting back into her car and speeding away. I was shaking as I texted my contact about what I'd seen. Their reply was immediate. "Good. Now leave." I didn't need to be told twice. I drove away, trying to convince myself that whatever was happening, there was none of my business. The next morning, $2,000 appeared in my bank account. For a moment, I felt relief. It was easy money, I thought. A week later, they reached out to me again. This time, the job was at a different location. The instructions were identical, and so was the promise of payment. Despite the uneasy feeling in my gut, I agreed. This time, things didn't go as smoothly. The same scenario played out. A man pacing in the house, a visitor arriving with a bag. But just as the visitor left, the man inside stopped, looking directly at my car. His eyes seemed to pierce through the darkness, locking onto me. I tried to stay calm, hoping he hadn't actually seen me. But then, my phone buzzed. I hesitated before turning it on, and my blood ran cold when I read the message. "You were seen. Don't let it happen again." My hands shook as I sped away, realizing that I might have crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I deleted everything: messages, contacts, browsing history, trying to erase any trace of my involvement. But a deep sense of dread followed me home. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, staring through the window at me. A few nights later, I heard noises outside my apartment. Footsteps crunching on the gravel, whispers that seemed to come from just outside my door. I peeked through the window, but I couldn't see anything. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt like prey being stalked. The next day, I found a note slipped under my door. It was typed out, and the message was clear. "Stay away. You've been warned." I moved out of that apartment the next day, disappearing to another town without telling anyone. I never got involved with the dark web again, but the fear never left. Even now, I find myself constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if someone is still out there, watching me just as I had watched them. It all started as a stupid dare. My friends and I had gathered at Jason's place for one of our late-night hangouts. The conversation drifted toward urban legends, and eventually the topic of the dark web came up. Jason, being the bravest, or maybe just the most reckless, suggested that we try to find something truly disturbing online. I laughed, shrugging it off as just another of his wild ideas. But later that night, when I was alone in my room, I couldn't shake the thought. Curiosity gnawed at me, and against my better judgment, I decided to dig deeper. After a few hours of research and fiddling with settings, I found myself on the dark web. The forums were unsettling, cryptic usernames, discussions about things that should never see the light of day. But I kept searching, hoping to find something that would give Jason a run for his money. After an hour of nothing but paranoia-inducing posts, a private message flashed on my screen. The sender was anonymous, and the message was brief. "You've been selected. Click here to join." There was a link. I hesitated, my gut screaming at me to close the browser and walk away, but the curiosity, mixed with a sense of proving myself, was too strong. I clicked the link. The screen went black. Then a message appeared. "Do you wish to confirm participation?" Below it was a button labeled Yes. I hovered my cursor over it, my hand trembling. After what felt like an eternity, I clicked Yes. Suddenly, a grainy video feed filled my screen. My stomach dropped as I saw a dimly lit room, almost empty except for a chair in the center. A man wearing a plain white mask stood next to the chair, staring directly at the camera. He gave a small wave, as if acknowledging his audience. The camera panned to the side, revealing a figure tied to the chair. A hood covered their head, and their bodies slumped forward. The whole setup looked unreal, like some kind of twisted performance. But as the figure stirred, their muffled cries reaching the microphone, the reality hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't fake. My phone buzzed on the desk, making me jump. It was a message, and it came from the same anonymous source. "Welcome, Observer 14. Enjoy the show." I tried to close the browser, but the window wouldn't close. No matter how many times I hit the escape key, the feed remained frozen on the screen. The masked man pulled out a small knife, running its tip slowly along the tied person's arm. The whimpering grew louder, and I could feel my own breath quickening. I unplugged my computer, yanking the cable out in desperation. The screen went dark, and I let out a shaky breath. But when I turned the computer back on, the feed resumed right where it left off. My hands shook as another message popped up. "Leaving isn't allowed, Observer 14. I reached out to Jason, trying to explain the situation, but I sounded crazy even to myself. He laughed it off, telling me I'd probably been duped by a cheap prank site. But the messages kept coming. each one more terrifying than the last. Keep watching, or you'll become the next guest. I tried calling the police, but what could I say? That I clicked on the wrong link and was now being forced to watch a live stream of something horrific. Days blurred together. I stayed awake for 3 nights straight, my eyes glued to the screen out of fear of what might happen if I looked away. My paranoia grew with every creak and shadow in my apartment. I barely ate, barely moved, until one final message appeared. You've been warned, Observer 14. This is your last chance. My heart raced as I read the words, and then my computer screen went dark. For a moment, relief washed over me, thinking it was finally over. But then, my phone buzzed. This time it was a text message from an unknown number. It contained only 2 things: my home address and a photograph. The picture was of me, taken through my own window as I sat watching the screen. I shattered my laptop that night, smashing it into pieces with a hammer, and I fled to my parents' house in another city, trying to escape whatever was coming for me. I thought I'd left it all behind, but even now, months later, I hear strange knocks on my window at night, always at the same time, 3:14 a.m. Sometimes my phone buzzes with a message that says, "See you soon, Observer 14. Each time it feels like a death sentence. I knew I shouldn't have gone on the dark web, but the urge to explore was too strong. I read countless stories of people finding things they shouldn't, but I never believed them. I thought I was smarter, more careful. But the dark web was like a quicksand pit, and I was sinking deeper with each click. After a while, I started receiving private messages from an anonymous user. Most of them were cryptic, but one caught my attention. It offered $5,000 for a simple delivery job, no questions asked. All I had to do was pick up a package from an old abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town and deliver it to an address they'd send me later. My financial situation wasn't great, and the money was tempting. I told myself it was just a one-time thing, that I could walk away after this. I accepted the job, and they sent me the instructions. The warehouse was in a part of town that even the police didn't patrol. That night, I drove out there, trying to ignore the unsettling feeling in my stomach. The building was dark, its windows broken, and the air smelled of decay. I walked inside, using my phone's flashlight to navigate. The package sat on a dusty table, small, wrapped in black plastic, with no label. It seemed harmless enough, but as I picked it up, I heard something, a faint scuffling noise behind me. My breath caught, and I spun around, shining the light into the shadows. Nothing. The silence pressed down on me, and I hurried back to my car, clutching the package like it was my lifeline. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, waiting for the next set of instructions. Finally, a message came through. Take the package to 47 Pine Street and leave it on the porch. Do not open it. My hands were shaking as I drove through the empty streets. 7 Pine Street was in a run-down neighborhood, the kind that made you lock your car doors even in broad daylight. The house itself looked abandoned, peeling paint, broken windows, a front porch that sagged under the weight of years. I left the package on the porch, glancing around the dark street. Just as I turned to leave, my phone buzzed again. Don't leave yet. Open the package. My heart pounded. This wasn't part of the plan. I tried to ignore the message, but another one followed, more insistent. Open it, or you won't get paid. Reluctantly, I tore off the black plastic, revealing a plain, unmarked box. Inside was a stack of photographs. My hands trembled as I flipped through them. They were images of people, each one in various states of torment, their faces twisted in pain and fear. But then my heart stopped when I reached the last photo. It was a picture of me, taken that very night, standing on the porch of the house. I dropped the box and stumbled back, my mind racing. Another message flashed on my screen. "You've been watched. Consider this a warning." I bolted back to my car, leaving the package behind, and sped away, my tires screeching against the pavement. I deleted every trace of the messages, tried to forget the house, but the images were burned into my memory. For weeks, I couldn't sleep. Every noise outside my apartment sounded like footsteps. Every shadow seemed to move. Then one morning I found an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a single photograph, another picture of me, taken as I slept in my bed. On the back, a handwritten message read, "You can't hide forever." I moved across the country after that, but every few months I find another photograph slipped under my door. I don't know how they find me, but I live in constant fear that one day I'll wake up to find them standing right outside my window.